For years, archivists believed film soundtracks could be fully mapped, fully understood, every tone accounted for, every imperfection explained. Analog recordings hissed, tape machines drifted, magnetic reels wore themselves thin. Nothing in a film print existed without a technical cause, but that assumption fractured the moment a handful of sci-fi restorations exposed something far stranger than noise. During high-resolution transfers of films spanning the late 20th century, engineers began detecting faint structures embedded in the depths of the audio patterns, too ordered to be errors, too concealed to be intentional additions. They were barely audible, nearly invisible to casual analysis, yet unmistakable under forensic inspection. Signals woven into the soundtracks, like threads of a message never meant to surface. Some were fleeting, others stretched through entire sequences, but all shared the same impossible trait. They appeared nowhere in mixing notes or production archives. Technicians attempting to isolate the anomalies reported uncanny sensations, shifts in mood, pressure behind the eyes, sudden flashes of familiarity with scenes they had never watched. A few described it as stepping into an echo that recognized them. Studios dismissed the anomalies as misread data, artifacts introduced by obsolete equipment. Yet remastered editions quietly removed the suspicious frequencies, smoothing the audio until every trace of the unexplained vanished. Across decades, 15 films carried fragments of these hidden transmissions, faint, persistent, and entirely unclaimed. Whether they originated from equipment glitches, forgotten experiments, or something that slipped through the boundaries of film itself remains uncertain, but tonight we bring them into view. 15 broadcasts, 15 shadows, each one pointing toward a signal no one ever agreed existed. 1. 2001. A Space Odyssey, 1968. The monolith harmonic veil. While performing a high-resolution rebuild of 2001, A Space Odyssey's monolith sequences, engineers detected a persistent harmonic veil lurking beneath the orchestral crescendos. At low levels, it resembled infrasonic rumble, something expected from aging magnetic tape, but deeper analysis revealed the veil to be stunningly consistent across all surviving prints, each carrying an identical frequency band that never drifted, never wavered. Such stability is impossible for incidental noise, suggesting a deliberate or otherwise extraordinary origin. When isolated, the harmonic veil produced physiological responses that startled technicians. Some felt momentary elevation of awareness, a sense of internal expansion. Others described a brushing sensation at the edge of perception, like standing at the threshold of a vast, unseen expanse. The waveform displayed repeating imperfections spaced at regular intervals, forming a pattern disturbingly similar to conceptual models of deep space beacons proposed decades after the film's release. Kubrick's production logs, famously exhaustive, make no mention of experimental subharmonic layers or prototype audio systems. Engineers from the era denied embedding anything of the sort. Yet attempts to remove the veil destabilized surrounding frequencies, causing the monolith scenes to lose their signature gravitas, as if the tone had fused with the emotional fabric of the sound design. Collectors who compare early prints insist that the veil subtly shifts depending on playback volume, sometimes revealing faint harmonic overtones that seem to press outward, as though trying to articulate something just beyond comprehension. These impressions, though unverifiable, have become a staple of the film's enduring mystique. In remastered editions, the veil is significantly reduced, but not entirely erased. A trace remains an infrasonic whisper draped across the monolith's presence, echoing a signal whose purpose feels both cosmic and unnervingly intimate. 2. Solaris 1972. The Neuro-Reverberant Field. During a comprehensive sonic overhaul of Solaris, archivists uncovered an anomalous reverberant field inhabiting the film's more introspective sequences. Unlike traditional reverb, which spreads outward from a clear source, this one seemed to fold inward, spiraling toward an inaudible center. When mapped spectrally, the reverberations displayed patterns reminiscent of neural oscillation, echoing the rhythms of cognitive activity more than physical acoustics. The phenomenon aligned with scenes involving memory distortion, emotional projection, and psychological drift. Engineers attempting to isolate the field found that it resisted decomposition. Each separation attempt produced fleeting distortions, soft clicks, compressed harmonics, and strange tremors that responded unpredictably to filtering. Several technicians reported the uncanny sensation of being momentarily pulled into a reflective state, as though the reverb itself encouraged contemplation. A few experienced vivid, unprompted imagery, faint landscapes, blurred faces, or long-forgotten emotional impressions. These responses, while subjective, occurred frequently enough to raise concern about the field's unusual psychoacoustic properties. Production documents offered no explanation. The film's audio was crafted using standard Soviet-era equipment, none of which possessed the ability to produce such mathematically intricate reverberation. Attempts to recreate the effect using period studio hardware yielded only superficial similarities. The archival team concluded that the anomaly must have arisen from an unknown environmental influence or an undocumented experimental technique, yet no evidence supports either theory. Later restorations toned down the reverberant field, unintentionally muting its most peculiar qualities. Fans familiar with early prints insist the original mix carried an atmospheric weight that modern versions lack an emotional density, reflecting the film's themes of memory looping back on itself. Whatever its origins, the neuro-reverberant field remains an acoustic mystery, an echo that seems less interested in amplifying sound and more concerned with amplifying thought, lingering in the spaces where memory and reality intertwine. 3. The Andromeda Strain, 1971. The biological signal drift. During an in-depth archival retransfer of the Andromeda Strain, audio engineers discovered a faint oscillatory smear woven beneath the sterile laboratory ambiances. At first, it resembled electronic flutter minor instability common in early magnetic soundtracks. But under detailed spectral inspection, the smear revealed a strange biological cadence, pulsing in irregular, breath-like intervals. The frequency shifts did not match machines, ventilation, or human respiration. Instead, the pattern fluctuated unpredictably, as though responding to unseen environmental factors inside the narrative itself. The anomaly reproduced across multiple surviving prints, each carrying a subtly different version of the same drifting pulse. This ruled out post-production contamination and pointed toward an unknown presence during the original recording or mixing. Analysts attempting to isolate the drift reported sensations of being observed, an uncanny impression of something leaning into their attention from within the waveform. One technician described the pattern as a heartbeat fumbling for coherence, even though the microfrequencies fell far outside organic ranges. Attempts to model the drift with period-accurate equipment yielded incomplete matches. Oscillators could recreate the tonal shape, but not the peculiar instability at its center. Some researchers speculated that the anomaly might have originated from experimental biomedical monitors devices that existed only in prototype form at the time and were not documented in production logs. Others suggested the drift could be a miscaptured external broadcast, though no known radio signature of the era corresponded to its frequency pattern. Interestingly, later remasters minimized or removed the drift entirely, smoothing the audio's clinical sound design. Yet collectors of original prints maintain that the older versions feel colder, more alien, imbued with an eerie sense of something alive, quietly shifting beneath the story's scientific anxieties. Whether accidental or not, the biological signal drift remains an unresolved acoustic footprint, whispering through a film centered on microscopic threats humanity was never prepared to confront. 4. THX 11381971. The Subterranean Modulation Grid. During a detailed spectral overhaul of THX 1138, engineers encountered an intricate modulation grid hidden beneath the film's sterile ambient soundscapes. At surface level, the hum of machinery and cavernous echoes fit the dystopian world of the underground city. But buried deeper was a triple-layered frequency system that oscillated in synchronized patterns, forming a grid-like structure that repeated throughout the film's most oppressive moments. The spacing between these oscillations was too mathematically precise to emerge from environmental noise or from typical mixing practices of the early 1970 seconds. Under high magnification, the modulation layers drifted in and out of alignment, producing pulses that resembled low-speed data transfers more than acoustic resonances. One technician likened the grid to a communication channel no one is speaking on anymore. What troubled the restoration team was the anomaly's consistency. It appeared across every surviving print, suggesting it was embedded in the original mix rather than introduced later. Individuals who listened to the isolated grid reported unexpected sensory effects. Some felt a brief narrowing of perception, as though their attention were being funneled into a smaller mental frame. Others experienced subtle spatial distortions, describing the room as elongating or contracting with the pulses. These reactions echoed the film's themes of psychological control, raising questions about whether the grid's presence was intentional or something far stranger. Attempts to reproduce the modulation layers using authentic period equipment failed repeatedly. While engineers could mimic the tones, they could not replicate the precise interlocking pulses that defined the grid's structure. No documentation from the sound department mentions experimental modulation or signal layering. Later, digital remasters removed the grid almost entirely, treating it as noise contamination. Yet many argue that its absence diminishes the unsettling atmosphere the film once carried. The surviving early mixes still contain the full modulation lattice, an acoustic architecture humming beneath the narrative, like the hidden circuitry of a society built on confinement and silent surveillance. 5. Logan's Run, 1976. The Renewal Cycle Interference. During the restoration of Logan's Run, audio specialists detected a peculiar interference pattern entwined within the film's bright analog synthesizer passages. Unlike the wavering imperfections common in 1972's electronic instrumentation, this interference followed a repeating cycle that mirrored the film's ritualistic themes. The pattern consisted of gliding microtones that rose and dipped in near-perfect arcs, each arc separated by intervals too deliberate to result from standard equipment drift. When analysts studied the anomaly at high resolution, they discovered that the interference contained small harmonic clusters that reappeared at consistent timestamps, particularly during scenes depicting the carousel ceremony or moments when characters questioned the stability of their world. The recurrence seemed almost narrative-aware, as though the pattern were shadowing the story's existential questions. Listeners exposed to the isolated interference experienced a mix of physical and emotional responses. Some noted a tightening behind the eyes, others felt a subtle dissociation from their surroundings. A handful described the interference as eerily familiar, like a sound remembered from a dream. These reactions prompted researchers to test whether the interference might mimic forms of auditory entrainment, but the results remained inconclusive. Attempts to recreate the interference using vintage synthesizers produced approximations but lacked the anomaly's signature precision. Engineers proposed that an external modulation source may have contaminated the recording chain, though no such device appears in the production logs. The mystery deepened when comparisons across different international prints showed slight variations in the interference's strength, suggesting the signal either degraded inconsistently or had been partially overwritten in some mixes. Modern remasters softened or eliminated the interference entirely, leaving the restored audio sounding polished but strangely devoid of the unsettling charge. Older fans remember, the original anomaly persists only in a few surviving prints, a looping, cyclical whisper embedded within the soundtrack, echoing the film's themes of rebirth and escape in tones that feel neither accidental nor fully explainable. 6. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. The Hidden Response Sequence. During a meticulous audio reconstruction of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, engineers uncovered a faint tonal structure concealed beneath the film's iconic musical exchanges. The familiar five-note motif dominated the surface, but lurking below it was a quieter, more elusive strand, an embedded sequence that did not correspond to any instrument recorded for the score. This secondary structure repeated in short bursts, almost like an echo attempting to mimic the main melody while forming its own divergent progression. Spectral mapping revealed that the hidden sequence followed a completely different mathematical spacing than the orchestral performance. Instead of adhering to harmonic intervals, the pattern traced a communications-like cadence, with each tone arriving at irregular but intentional-looking delays. No synthesizer or acoustic method documented in the production materials could produce these timing anomalies. Even more puzzling, the sequence appeared only in specific prints, mostly early theatrical mixes and certain archival negatives, while many later versions lacked it entirely. Technicians who listened to the isolated sequence reported subtle psychological reactions. Some felt their breathing shift, aligning unintentionally with the spacing between the tones. Others experienced an odd sense of anticipation, as if waiting for a call and response interaction that never arrived. One engineer described the pattern as a question suspended inside the soundtrack. Attempts to remove the anomaly resulted in noticeable distortion within surrounding frequencies, as though the hidden sequence had fused with the film's acoustic foundation. This led several restorers to suspect that the pattern might have been introduced accidentally by an unknown external source during mixing, a theory complicated by the fact that no contemporaneous broadcasting equipment transmitted at those specific tonal intervals. Later remasters almost entirely scrubbed the sequence, but early collectors still insist the hidden layer imparts a strange emotional charge to the film. Whatever its origin, the sequence sits beneath the surface like an unheard reply, one that seems to be waiting patiently for someone capable of decoding it. 7. Alien 1979, The Deep Vector Resonance. While reconstructing Alien's original audio elements, preservationists discovered a recurring resonance buried beneath the Nostromo's ambient machinery. Initially mistaken for ordinary engine rumble, the resonance behaved with an eerie consistency. Every few seconds, the frequency rose and fell in a perfectly measured cycle, too deliberate for equipment noise, yet too subtle to have been intentionally designed. It resembled a beacon, slowed to a crawl, and pushed into infrasonic territory. The pattern aligned with scenes that highlighted isolation or impending danger. As characters ventured deeper into the ship, the resonance sharpened slightly, as though tracking their movement. During moments of quiet dread, the signal thinned but never disappeared. Its persistence across multiple prints ruled out damage or transfer artifacts. Engineers isolating the resonance reported distinct psychological effects. Some felt a faint pressure near the sternum, others sensed an unshakable impression that the space around them had grown narrower. A few described brief flashes of imagery, metal corridors unfamiliar to the Nostromo, or impressions of vast empty distances. Though subjective, these reactions appeared with unnerving frequency. Attempts to decode the frequency cycles yielded no definitive explanation. Some analysts heard similarities to maritime distress signals. Others pointed to deep space communication experiments conducted around the same era, though nothing conclusively matched the resonance's pacing. Later remasters softened the low-end spectrum, suppressing the anomaly almost entirely. But enthusiasts who own early theatrical releases can still detect it, a slow, rhythmic beacon pulsing beneath the ship's silence. Whether the resonance originated from a mechanical quirk or something more enigmatic remains unknown. What is certain is that the signal feels purposeful, an acoustic presence nested inside the film's darkest spaces, calling out in a voice that doesn't seem to belong to the ship, the crew, or even the story itself. 8. The Black Hole 1979, The Singular Harmonic Surge. During a multi-channel remaster of The Black Hole, audio technicians uncovered a base layer fluctuation hidden deep beneath scenes involving the approach toward the singularity. This fluctuation behaved unlike any conventional low-frequency effect of its era. Instead of maintaining a stable pattern, the surge expanded and contracted irregularly, almost as if following an invisible gravitational tide. The waveform bent in ways too intentional for analog drift, yet too chaotic to belong to standard sound design. Under high-resolution analysis, the surge formed sweeping arcs across the spectrum, arcs that mimicked theoretical models of gravitational wave resonance. Long before such phenomena were scientifically confirmed, the surge's shape reacted subtly to on-screen tension, growing sharper as danger escalated and thinning during calmer transitions. No evidence suggests the filmmakers experimented with such acoustic modeling. The anomaly caused physical responses among engineers who monitored it for extended periods. Some felt a subtle disorientation, as though the floor beneath them softened. Others experienced a heaviness in the chest or a momentary pull, like standing near a powerful vacuum. While these sensations were mild, their consistency raised questions about the frequency's biological influence. Attempts to reproduce the surge using vintage synthesizers and subharmonic generators produced results that were similar but never exact. The original signature possessed a kind of internal turbulence, a shifting center that refused to remain anchored, as though the tone were imitating the collapse of space itself. When the film underwent later audio cleanup, the surge diminished drastically. Modern editions present a smoother, more polished bass floor, but longtime viewers insist something essential vanished, an unsettling undercurrent that once haunted the scenes near the singularity. The lingering question is whether the harmonic surge was an accident of analog conditions, a technological anomaly, or something inadvertently captured when the film tried to imagine forces humanity wouldn't understand for decades. Whatever it was, its presence still echoes faintly in the earliest surviving prints, like a shadow of impossible physics woven into sound. 9. TRON 1982, the binary drift signature. During an exhaustive digital restoration of Tron, audio engineers detected an unusual undercurrent humming beneath the electronic score. At first, it resembled the kind of low-level chatter produced by aging analog gear. But as technicians applied deeper spectral analysis, the noise began to reveal an astonishing level of structure. It broke apart into pulses, rapid, staccato bursts, spaced at regular intervals, forming clusters that resembled binary fragments more than musical elements. What unsettled the team was the behavior of these pulses across different scenes. During high-energy sequences, such as the light cycle arena, the clusters thickened, almost as if reacting to visual entropy. In quiet moments, they elongated into soft bursts, still patterned but more fluid. This variability suggested a signal responding dynamically to the film's pacing, something no 1982 mixing setup could have produced on its own. When the drift signature was isolated, listeners reported odd neurological sensations. Some saw geometric flashes behind their eyelids, grids, lattices, and shifting corridors reminiscent of early computer architecture. Others felt brief internal surges of recognition, as though they were remembering digital landscapes they had never visited. While such reactions might seem imaginative, they persisted across multiple listeners unaware of one another's reports. Attempts to decode the pulses produced contradictory results. Certain interpretations hinted at truncated data packets, similar to experimental network transmissions of the era. Others resembled error correction rhythms, not commercially deployed until years later. Nothing aligned cleanly with known technology. Most curious of all was the signal's disappearance in later releases. Remastered editions dramatically softened or erased the pattern, possibly due to noise filtering. Yet early theatrical mixes still contain the drift signature encoded so deeply into the soundtrack that its origin remains an unanswered question. Whatever its source, the binary drift signature feels less like an error and more like a quiet broadcast, something woven into Tron's circuitry long before anyone thought to listen for it. 10. Blade Runner 1982, the recursive echo imprint. During a painstaking archival rebuild of Blade Runner's master audio, engineers noted a faint echo emerging from certain synth-heavy passages. It wasn't a traditional reverb tail, nor was it a mechanical reflection from the recording environment. Instead, the echo looped in on itself, forming a recursive pattern that gained definition with each repetition. Rather than fading, the imprint sharpened as though distilling its own structure with every cycle. The imprint surfaced primarily in scenes involving replicants or artificial memories, almost as if the soundtrack were mirroring the film's themes of repetition, identity layering, and constructed consciousness. Under spectrographic inspection, the echo displayed a complex internal architecture, with micro-delays arranged in a pattern too symmetrical to arise from analog equipment. Yet, no production logs indicate any experiment with multi-stage feedback systems or prototype echo processors. Listeners who monitored the isolated imprint described sensations ranging from mild disorientation to a peculiar pulling inward of thought, as though the sound encouraged introspection. A few reported experiencing fragmented mental imagery, neon corridors, rainfall against metal, faces blurred by reflection. While these reactions could be influenced by the film's iconic visuals, they persisted even when listeners heard the audio without any accompanying images. Attempts to reproduce the imprint using early 1982 studio hardware yielded incomplete results. Engineers could match the tone but not the evolving clarity of the recursive loop. The anomalies' behavior suggested a feedback system guided by an unseen variable, something subtly adjusting the echo's shape with each cycle. When later remasters were issued, the imprint grew faint or vanished altogether. Some fans claim its absence altered the film's emotional depth, stripping away an intangible layer of atmosphere they remembered vividly. Still, the earliest mixes hold the recursive imprint like a quiet self-reflection, an echo that seems to be listening to itself, shaping its identity one loop at a time. 11. The Terminator 1984. The temporal compression hum. When engineers conducted a granular analysis of the Terminator's earliest surviving audio elements, they encountered a deep infrasonic murmur embedded within scenes involving temporal displacement. The tone barely registered on standard meters, but when captured through ultra-sensitive equipment, it revealed a slow, rhythmic swell, something resembling compression cycles rather than natural ambience. Each pulse arrived with uncanny consistency, forming a low-frequency lattice beneath the rest of the mix. The hum behaved differently depending on the scene. When characters referenced the future, the signal expanded subtly, generating overtones that stretched like elongated shadows. During flashbacks, it contracted, forming tight, compressed bursts that flickered across the spectrum like collapsing echoes. The phenomenon aligned too precisely with narrative beats to be coincidence, yet no production notes discussed any such layering. Technicians working closely with the isolated hum reported unsettling sensations. Some felt disoriented, as though the room itself were tilting. Others described a momentary lag in perception, like their thoughts were a fraction of a second behind their senses. A few experienced an eerie calm that vanished the moment the hum was muted. These were not typical reactions to infrasonic noise. Attempts to replicate the tone using vintage synthesizers and analog gear produced partial matches, but none captured the strange elasticity of the original frequency shifts. The hum seemed to stretch and snap back, behaving like something responding to temporal tension rather than acoustic dynamics. By the time the film was remixed for newer formats, the compression pattern had mostly disappeared, smoothed out by digital filtering. But in early theatrical releases, the hum persists beneath the story's fractured timeline, pulsing like an unseen mechanism, regulating the film's reality. Whether artifact, oversight, or something inadvertently captured by machinery straining against its own limitations, the temporal hum remains one of the film's most enigmatic undercurrents. 12. Predator 1987. The phase-shifted cloak residue. During an advanced audio reconstruction of Predator, technicians uncovered an unusual set of modulating frequencies hidden beneath the creature's signature clicking effects. What initially sounded like random static resolved, under deep spectrum inspection, into a layered configuration of shifting phase patterns. These patterns weren't smooth enough to come from tape drift, yet they were too mathematically aligned to be incidental. They rose and fell in synchronized arcs that repeatedly aligned with moments when the alien figure activated its cloaking system on screen. The anomaly exhibited behavior that startled even seasoned restorers. Each time the cloaking shimmer appeared visually, the underlying pulse shifted into a higher frequency brace, as though the soundtrack were anticipating the effect rather than following it. No documentation from the original sound team mentions experimental modulation, and the tools available in the mid-1980 seconds were incapable of generating such precision without custom hardware. When isolated, the residue produced psychological responses difficult to categorize. Engineers reported heightened alertness, sudden spikes of peripheral awareness, and the odd sensation that something behind them had moved. One described it as an audio form of surveillance, though no rational mechanism could account for such a feeling. Others noted that the signal's phase rotations resembled early research into directional audio beams technology not associated with film production of the era. Further confusion arose when comparing versions of the film. Some international prints contained a stronger, clearer version of the residue, while certain home releases nearly erased it completely. This inconsistency suggested either multiple undocumented mixes or a signal that degraded or strengthened depending on its transfer path. By the time newer remasters were issued, most of the anomaly had been filtered out. Yet original theatrical mixes still hold the faint, shifting signature, an acoustic presence that seems to stalk the audience just as the unseen hunter stalks its prey. In the silent corners of the soundtrack, the cloak residue remains, flickering between frequencies like a form trying for a moment to reveal itself. 13. They Live 1988. The repeating subsignal pulse. During a forensic audio sweep of They Live, engineers found a rhythmic undercurrent embedded within several broadcast sequences, a faint pulse that seemed to sit just below the threshold of conscious hearing. What set it apart from ordinary analog hum was its unwavering interval. Every 4.27 seconds, a soft but structured spike rose and fell as though marking time for an unseen transmitter. When mapped visually, the pattern displayed a consistency far too precise for 1980 seconds mixing irregularities. The pulse behaved strangely under isolation. As engineers filtered out surrounding layers, the subsignal grew sharper, not weaker. It formed a compressed envelope, almost like a coded carrier wave. No optical soundtrack or magnetic print of the era should contain such refined timing. And yet multiple early versions of the film carried the exact same pulse verified across different regions and reels. Headphone listeners reported uncanny sensations, faint tingling in the jaw, sudden shifts in spatial awareness, or the impression that the pulse echoed from somewhere inside their skull rather than from speakers. A few mentioned intrusive internal repetition as if their minds looped certain lines of dialogue without the film replaying them. Attempts to decode the subsignal generated wildly inconsistent outputs. Some analysts believed the pulse resembled fragments of early encrypted communications. Others argued it matched the pacing of certain military low-frequency tests. No claim was ever proven. When the studio prepared later home releases, the pulse weakened dramatically, smoothed into the ambience until it nearly disappeared. Whether this was an intentional scrub or a byproduct of noise reduction remains unclear. What stays certain is that They Live, a film centered on hidden transmissions and subliminal control, carried a literal encoded rhythm beneath its surface, a signal whose origin, purpose, and intended audience remain as mysterious as the film's warnings. 14. Dark City 1998. The Mirrored Dissonance Thread. While preparing Dark City for a high-definition sonic remaster, audio engineers encountered a wandering harmonic filament threaded through several of the film's identity-altering sequences. At low levels, it sounded like a faint shimmer, too subtle to register as music. But under spectral magnification, the thread revealed a startling quality. It appeared to fold back on itself, mirroring its own waveform in reverse cycles, as though two versions of the same tone were attempting to occupy the same moment in time. Unlike traditional modulation artifacts, this thread drifted unpredictably across frequency bands. Sometimes it hovered above dialogue, sometimes it hovered within the ambient drones. Occasionally, it cut sharply across the stereo field like a brief, shimmering incision. Its behavior seemed almost reactive, growing stronger during scenes in which characters regained memories or realized the world around them was artificially restructured. Some technicians described a strange sensation while isolating the thread, a feeling of momentary displacement, as if they were remembering something they themselves had not lived. Others said it induced a kind of temporal vertigo, the subtle sense that time inside the room was bending inward. None of these reactions matched typical responses to audio anomalies. Attempts to reconstruct the thread using digital tools or vintage analog synthesizers repeatedly failed. The tone's structural curvature was too fluid, too deliberate, and too self-referential to have come from standard mixing equipment of the 1990 seconds. Yet the production archives contain no hints of experimental layering. When the film was remastered years later, the thread almost entirely vanished. Some fans noticed the difference immediately, saying the new mix felt less haunted, as though an unseen presence had been removed. Whether artifact or intrusion, the mirrored dissonance thread remains one of Dark City's most enigmatic sonic echoes, a tone that seems to remember itself even when no one else can. 15. The Matrix 1999. The Phantom Packet Layer. During a full-spectrum inspection of the original theatrical audio for The Matrix, restoration teams uncovered a peculiar digital imprint buried beneath the film's bass-heavy mechanical textures. At first glance, the anomaly resembled corrupted data compression residue typical of late 90 digital sound delivery. But when engineers magnified the waveform, they found the pattern was not random at all. It repeated with the precision of clockwork, forming compressed clusters that looked uncannily like fragmented bursts of encoded information. These bursts emerged only during scenes that questioned perception, temporal stability, or system failure. Whether Neo encountered déjà vu, or the environment stuttered, or the machinery of the world revealed its instability, the phantom layer surged subtly underneath. The pattern didn't align with any known DTS or Dolby encoding standard of the era. It wasn't packet loss, it wasn't dropout, and it certainly wasn't documented in any mixing suite logs. Technicians who attempted to decode the bursts found their software responding inconsistently. Some programs crashed, others produced unreadable spectrograms that resembled digital snow. A handful generated fleeting shapes that looked like distorted glyphs, though no two outputs were ever the same. Engineers began describing the anomaly as a ghost protocol, a signal behaving like a message with no stable form. Collectors with early prints swear the bursts provoke odd cognitive reactions, a tightening of focus, a sense of physical stillness, as though time itself is momentarily holding its breath. One listener insisted the signal felt like a prompt waiting for input. End quote. Till taken as bass. My follow and reader see end. Later remastered releases scrubbed the low frequency range, smoothing the audio into a cleaner but noticeably less charged version. Whether the phantom packet layer was a technological accident, an unnoticed cross-transmission, or something woven into the fabric of the film's reality remains unanswered. But it lingers in the earliest mixes like a whisper, one that seems to question the very system generating it. If these fragments truly drifted unnoticed through decades of cinema, then the question isn't how they were hidden, it's what else might still be transmitting beneath the surface. Every anomaly we traced tonight hinted at structures outside the frame, signals waiting for someone patient enough to hear them. If you feel the resonance lingering, follow it. The archive never stops expanding, and there are frequencies we haven't charted yet. Stay with us, and we'll keep listening to whatever is trying to break through the static.